This is a jaw harp. And I'm not very good at playing it. But do you know who would be? The Darkhad Shamans of Mongolia. Let's take a look at this fascinating group of people. But I'm going to lay out a couple of key questions before we get any further. Who are the Darkhad people? What were their historical practices? What are their modern practices? How did repressive governments and imperialism impact shamanism? How were these rural shamans different from urban ones? Tucked away in the northern reaches of Mongolia and belonging to a small ethnic group, the Darkhad people live in a valley of the same name. They're on the border of Russia, and they're known for their forests and mountains, and they're very fascinating shamans, practicing what they call pure black shamanism because of its lack of Buddhist influence, and representing an unadulterated form of Mongolian shamanism. The primary purpose of Darkhad shamans is to act as healers and spiritual leaders for their communities. With an oral tradition and sacred words and phrases passed down generation to generation, it's a very communal and intergenerational practice. If you were a Darkhad child in the 1700s, you would likely be hearing the same special phrases and special words that have been spoken for over 1,000 years. The identity of the spirits themselves reveals how intertwined heritage is with the pure black tradition. There are spirits from the mountains, forests, lakes, and ancestors. The shamans use symbolic regalia in their rituals, which can be done in a yurt or outdoors. Bells, antler headdresses, and iron trinkets adorn their bodies while they play drums and jaw harps. The bells operate as a lure for these spirits, while protecting the shaman from harmful ones. Alongside a drum as a spiritual vehicle, they create the transition from our world to the spirit world. Antler headdresses symbolize the connection that shamans have to this spirit world, and their ability to embody an animal during their performances. These can also have more local meanings, connecting the shamans to their clan heritage. Iron trinkets give the shamans strength and protection during these rituals as well. Each of these items acts as a tool to guide spirits towards the shaman and to connect them with both the landscape and their ancestors. There's an interesting cosmology as well. Similar to other Mongolian, Siberian, and Turkic groups, there was a three-tiered world system, and an emphasis on the stars and sky. The isolation of the Darkhad people allowed Buddhism to pass over them. But despite this minimal contact, there was a little bit of tension between the two faiths. But even though this secluded worldview seemed very stable, things are never stagnant. Everything changed at the turn of the 20th century. Institutions that once seemed like strange new ideas now seemed like outdated old traditions. Mongolia spent a decade, from 1911 to 1921, trying to break free from China. First the Qing dynasty, then the Republic. As the nation drifted further and further from China, they drifted towards the Soviet Union. But you have to understand, the Soviet Union did not act as some kind of savior for Mongolia, much less the Darkhad shamans. They weren't just your friendly, keeping up with the Joneses kind of neighbor. Whatever Moscow said, its satellite states, like Mongolia at the time, had to follow. During Stalin's Great Purge, leaders in Mongolia were killed as well for not following what Stalin demanded. This difficult period in time led to a lot of religious repression, and not just in the Soviet Union, but in Mongolia as well. Shamanism had to go underground. It was publicly forbidden. Drums were burned, sacred objects were thrown out, and people were coerced and forced into abandoning their traditional ways. But despite the efforts of these hostile governments, the pure black shamanistic tradition did not disappear. Many families would continue to say these sacred phrases, or they would hide their sacred objects. Drums would be buried and regalia would be repurposed for the modern age. This attempted resilience is one of the only reasons that we can still talk about Darkhad shamanism today, and not just treat it like some relic from the past. In the early 90s, when communism fell across the world, Mongolia was no different. It wasn't some kind of socialist stronghold. The transition to democracy allowed for a cultural revival of sorts. We would see all these Darkhad shamans and other shamans in Mongolia coming out of the woodworks. Their regalia came back, their rituals came back, and people sought out these shamans to teach them the old ways. For the Darkhad people, these new shamans weren't just an attempt at spiritual healing. It was a way to reclaim their cultural identity that had been squashed decade after decade. So, what's been retained? Many traditional elements are still there. The ceremonial objects like jaw harps, antlers, drums, and more. But there's a clear tension in Mongolia. Some shamans try to stick to the old ways, but in urban centers like Ulaanbaatar, we see this neo-shamanism emerging, much like what we see in Korea. These neo-shamans in urban centers incorporate a lot of syncretic elements into their practice. We see Buddhist elements, we see New Age mysticism practices, we see even some psychotherapy stuff as well. And one of the biggest elements they've added is capitalism, much to the dismay of their socialist forefathers. But this new branch of shamanism raises an important question. Is it still shamanism? What is this exactly? Has shamanism been adapted and evolved to the New Age, or is it diluted? Today, we see Darkhad shamans criticizing their cousins in the city. They say that it's some kind of imitation, that the people don't have the proper legitimacy to act as shamans. Urban shamans have been known to break down sacred phrases into a couple simple words, which might add to the feelings of the Darkhad shamans. But despite this, even the Darkhad have had to adapt to modern situations in the modern world. We see the Darkhad incorporating tourism into their rituals sometimes. They bring in foreigners to show them an authentic version of what shamanism may be. They do this as a way to provide for their communities and give themselves more legitimacy as well. The way I see it, there's two shamanisms in Mongolia. You've got one of the land, the mountains, the lakes, and the forests. You've got another of capitalism, tourism, and the modern world. But which one is more legitimate? Is one more legitimate? I feel like that brings up a good question about cultural continuity, and are your practices really legitimate if there's been a gap in practice? Now, the question of legitimacy for these revitalized practices is one that I just don't have enough time to answer. But you should think about it. Go out into the world, see what practices have been reinvented and revitalized, and ask yourself, is there cultural continuity there? And are they legitimate? But for the Darkhad people, the Darkhad shamans, I think there is legitimacy, and I think there is cultural continuity despite the gap. Thank you.